My name is Tony, so let me take you back to my college days when I met Lily, the girl who would become my crush, and so much more. We hit it off from the start, and our friendship grew strong. We were practically inseparable, Lily. She was the heart and soul of our group. From the moment I met her, she radiated this infectious energy that drew people in. She was my college buddy, and we hit it off right away. Her laughter was contagious, and her smile could light up the darkest of days. We had so much in common, from our taste in music to our love for exploring the unknown. That's probably why we bonded so quickly and became inseparable. We would go on all sorts of adventures together, from hiking in the woods to attending local music gigs. And I got to know her family pretty well, especially her brother James. James, he was quite an enigmatic character. I first met him when I became friends with his sister, Lily. He was her older brother, and from the get-go I could tell he was different. While Lily was outgoing like me, James was the complete opposite, shy, reclusive, and immersed in his own little world of the unknown. He had this fascination with all things paranormal and occult, ghosts, demons, and stuff like that. He was always reading books about it or watching creepy documentaries. It was like he had this deep hunger for unraveling the mysteries of the supernatural. At first, I found his interests intriguing, but as time went on, I also realized how deeply it affected him. He would often spend hours alone in his room, lost in his thoughts and research. I tried to engage him in conversations, but he seemed to prefer the company of his own thoughts. Despite his reclusive nature, he was quite intelligent and knowledgeable about the subjects he was passionate about. I guess that's what made him even more mysterious and, to be honest, a little intimidating at times. He was pretty shy and reclusive, which made him all the more intriguing. I mean, I'd hang out with Lily and her family, but James would often keep to himself, lost in his own world of mysterious stuff. One fateful night, I was asleep in my dorm when my phone rang. It was Lily, and she sounded terrified. She asked me to come over to her place right away, saying something was terribly wrong with James. I didn't think twice. I rushed over as fast as I could. When I arrived, Lily and her mum greeted me at the door, fear written all over their faces. They explained that James had been acting strange all day, and as night fell, things got worse. He seemed possessed or something, and they had to lock him in Lily's room for safety. They even called her Uncle Brad to come help. Without wasting a second, we all hurried inside Lily's room, where they had managed to lock James to prevent him from causing any harm. As we entered the room, an overwhelming sense of unease washed over me. The atmosphere felt heavy, and I could feel a strange energy in the air. James was in a corner of the room, and his eyes were vacant, as if he were in a trance. He was muttering incoherent words under his breath, and his body was trembling. It was a chilling sight, and I couldn't help but shiver with fear. Lily and her mother were desperately trying to comfort James, but he seemed completely disconnected from reality. I could see the fear in their eyes as they struggled to understand what was happening to their brother and son. As we tried to calm James down, we experienced several terrifying and inexplicable occurrences in the room. Objects started moving on their own, and the room felt unusually cold, even though it was a warm night. Shadows seemed to dance across the walls, and I could hear faint whispers in the air. At one point, the lights in the room flickered, and the atmosphere grew even more intense. I felt a heavy pressure on my chest, as if something unseen was trying to push me away. The feeling of being watched and the sense of an unseen presence made my skin crawl. As the minutes ticked by, the situation seemed to escalate. James's muttering grew louder and more aggressive, and he started thrashing around as if he were possessed by something malevolent. I felt a mix of fear and helplessness, not knowing how to protect myself or my friends from whatever was happening. The normalcy of everyday life had been replaced by a nightmarish ordeal that I couldn't comprehend. When Lily's uncle Brad arrived, I was relieved to have someone with more experience in these matters by our side. Brad immediately took charge and handled the situation with remarkable composure. He tried to communicate with James, using a calming and reassuring tone, and I could see that his presence had a stabilizing effect. As Brad worked to calm James down, I stayed close to Lily and her mother, trying to provide whatever comfort and support I could. The fear in their eyes mirrored my own, and we clung to each other for strength. Throughout the ordeal, the room seemed to be filled with an otherworldly energy. Strange noises echoed, and the air crackled with an eerie electricity. Time seemed to stand still, and the minutes felt like an eternity. Eventually, with Brad's help, James began to show signs of calming down. The violent outbursts subsided, and his breathing became more steady. It was a small glimmer of hope in the midst of the darkness. Thinking that he must be tired, Brad went out to get James a glass of water and asked me to look after him for a few minutes. That's when things started to get terrifying once again. James, who looked almost normal a few moments ago, started to look at me with eyes that looked like in a trance and started to talk to me. But what came out of his mouth was unrecognizable. Then, as if the situation couldn't get any stranger, James slowly began to rise off the ground. At first it was just a few inches, but soon he was floating a foot above the bed. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was as if gravity had lost its grip on him, and he was defying the laws of nature. Fear gripped me like a vice, and I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed, unable to comprehend what was unfolding before me. I had heard of paranormal activities, but this was something else entirely. It was beyond anything I could have imagined. When Brad returned with water, he found me huddled in a corner, scared to death. James had seemingly returned to normal, leaving us all in shock and confusion. I quickly called my friend to come pick me up, because I couldn't handle being alone after that nightmare. On the ride back home after that harrowing night at Lily's house, I was a mix of emotions. Fear, confusion, and a deep sense of unease weighed heavily on my mind. My heart was still pounding, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something malevolent lingered in the shadows. Sitting in the car, I kept replaying the events of the night in my mind, trying to make sense of what had happened. The image of James levitating and speaking in an unknown language haunted me. It felt like a scene from a horror movie, but this was real life, and I had been right there, witnessing it all. As we drove through the dark, empty streets, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of dread. The familiar roads and buildings now seemed eerie and unfamiliar, as if the darkness had seeped into every corner of my world. The night air felt heavy, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something sinister lurking behind us. My mind was racing with questions, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had just glimpsed into a realm of the supernatural that I wasn't meant to see. What had caused James to act in such a terrifying manner? Was it really something supernatural, or was there a logical explanation hidden in the depths of the occult practices he had dabbled in? Most of all, I was deeply concerned for Lily and her family. I had been so close to them, and now I felt a growing distance, a sense of unease about the darkness that had touched their lives. I knew that I couldn't simply forget what I had witnessed, and I wondered if our friendship would ever be the same. Fear gnawed at me, but so did a sense of responsibility. I felt compelled to understand what had happened that night, to find a way to protect Lily and her family from any potential dangers that lurked in the shadows. But I also knew that I had to tread carefully and not delve too deeply into the darkness that had already consumed James. As I finally arrived back at my dorm room, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something had followed me. I was relieved to be away from Lily's house, but I couldn't escape the lingering unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. That night, I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with questions and fears. The experience had left a profound impact on me, and I knew that I couldn't simply go back to being the carefree and adventurous college student I once was. Something had changed, and I couldn't ignore the chilling reality of the paranormal that had now become a part of my life story. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake off the fear and curiosity. I started investigating James and found out about his involvement in Satanism and other dark stuff. During the investigation, I delved into James's interests and activities related to the paranormal. I wanted to understand what had led him to such a disturbing and terrifying state that night. It was a journey into the unknown, one that left me both intrigued and fearful. I began by researching online about the occult, Satanism and other paranormal activities James had been involved in. I stumbled upon various forums, websites, and even some disturbing videos that delved into dark rituals and practices. It was a chilling experience to explore these dark corners of the internet, and I often found myself feeling uneasy and uncomfortable. As I delved deeper, I found that James had been part of online groups and forums that discussed summoning spirits, communicating with the dead, and invoking dark entities. He had been captivated by tales of possession and believed he could gain special abilities through these practices. Talking to some of James's acquaintances, I discovered that he had been spending a lot of time alone, immersing himself in these paranormal interests. He had even visited some reputedly haunted locations in the area, hoping to witness something supernatural. As much as I cared for Lily, I knew I had to keep my distance. The memories of that night haunted me, and I couldn't bear to put myself in that position again. It was a tough decision, but I had to prioritize my own well-being. After the terrifying incident with James, Lily and her family were deeply shaken and visibly distressed. The fear in their eyes was evident, and it was clear that they had never experienced anything like this before. Lily's mother was particularly frightened and concerned for her son's well-being. She couldn't fathom what had happened to James and was desperately seeking answers. She confided in me that James had always been interested in the paranormal, but she never imagined it would lead to something so terrifying. Lily, on the other hand, was a mix of emotions. She was scared for her brother's safety and worried about what might happen next. She had witnessed firsthand the violent and possessed behavior he displayed, and it was evident that it deeply disturbed her. As for Brad, Lily's uncle, he was both shocked and alarmed by the situation. Being experienced in dealing with emergencies and difficult situations, he did his best to keep a calm and composed demeanor. However, there was an underlying sense of concern and urgency as he tried to understand what had transpired. In the aftermath of the incident, Lily's family became even more cautious about James and his interests in the paranormal. They sought professional help and counseling for him, hoping to find some explanation and a way to prevent such events from happening again. They also expressed their gratitude towards me for rushing to their aid that night. They knew I had experienced something truly terrifying and that my concern for Lily's safety was genuine. However, they understood my need to distance myself from the situation, given how overwhelming and unsettling it had been. As time went on, Lily's family tried to move forward, but the memory of that night lingered like a dark cloud over their lives. They remained vigilant and cautious, always on edge, fearing that something similar might happen again. For me, it was a challenging decision to step back from my close friendship with Lily. I cared for her deeply, but the fear of getting entangled in more paranormal occurrences was too great. I felt guilty and conflicted, but I knew it was the best choice for my own mental well-being. Even though we grew apart, I still followed up with Lily's family from a distance, making sure they were coping and offering my support whenever needed. The bond we had formed during our time together was not easily broken, and I hoped that, in time, they would find peace and normalcy once again. So there you have it, the chilling tale of how a seemingly normal night turned into a nightmare of paranormal proportions. Sometimes life throws you into situations that make you question everything you thought you knew about the world. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, and I can't help but wonder what else lurks in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. Stay safe out there, and never underestimate the unknown. It's a dark and mysterious world, my friends, and it's up to us to navigate through it, one chilling tale at a time.